Welcome to Isaiah's Story Corner. I'm Isaiah Ray, and today I'll be reading The House That George Built, written by Suzanne Slade, illustrated by Rebecca Bond. Forward, a very short story before the real story. It all began when American colonists became fed up with the English king. They were sick and tired of his outrageous taxes, unfair rules, and occasional temper tantrums. So 13 colonies fought England for their freedom, and on July 4th, 1776, they formed their own country, the United States of America. Now, as you might imagine, this new nation didn't want another bossy, bejeweled king. Instead, the people decided to elect a president. They looked high in love for someone honest and fair. They searched far and wide for someone trustworthy and brave. That someone was George Washington. George had many responsibilities as the first president. There were laws to pass, important people to meet, and the entire country to run. Although George was the busiest guy in the land, he wanted to create a home where future presidents would live. So George set out to build a special house that would be a symbol of this great new nation. This is the story of the president's house that George built. First, George looked for the perfect place to put this fine house. He searched the land and discovered a beautiful wooded hill in Maryland. On the hill, George found a lovely spot overlooking the sparkling Potomac River. This is the lot, that grand, scenic spot for the president's house that George built. Next, George needed a plan for the president's house. He held a contest and offered $1,500 and a gold medal to the person with the best design. When entries started arriving, George got worried. Some drawings were too small and simple for this strong, growing nation. Others were too fussy and frilly for this hardworking new nation. Then George bought a magnificent drawing with majestic columns, grand staircase, and stately oval room. James Hobion's design was just right, and he won the contest. This is the design that will stand for all time, that was drawn for the lot, that grand, scenic spot for the president's house that George built. Even though George had the most important job in America, he didn't think he was too important to lend a hand to the building project. George strapped on his boots and helped survey and measure the construction site. Then, he pounded in wood stakes to mark the exact location where the president's house would be built. A large hole was dug between the stakes and filled with stone, wood, and sand, creating a firm foundation for the president's house. This is the foundation that was dug for our nation, the held the design that will stand for all time, that was drawn for the lot, that grand scenic spot for the president's house that George built. Now, George needed bricks, lots of them. But how could he get thousands of heavy bricks up the steep hill? Fortunately, the mud beneath George's feet contained clay and sand, the perfect ingredients were making bricks. Soon, tin kilns were baking out red-hot bricks around the clock. Bricklayers used the fresh bricks to lay straight, sturdy walls. This is the brick that was baked strong and thick, that was laid on the foundation, that was dug for a nation, that held a design that would stand for all time, that was drawn for the lot, that grand scenic spot where the president's house that George built. Then George faced another problem. The nearby quarries didn't have enough stone to cover the outside of the president's house. He knew there was plenty of beautiful, smooth stone in England, but he could never crawl back to the king. So George changed the house plan from 3 stories to 2, so there would need less stone. Stoneworkers carved flowers, leaves, and ribbons from the soft sandstone. Then the stone was painted with a thick sealer made of water, lime, salt, glue, and ground up rice, which turned the house white. This is the stone that was chiseled and honed, that went over the brick, that was baked strong and thick, that was laid on the foundation, that was dug for our nation, that held a design that would stand for all time, that was drawn for the lot, that grand scenic spot, for the president's house that George built. Progress on the president's house was slow, but George wasn't discouraged. Carpenters brought a wooden frame for the roof. They hammered sturdy timbers to support the inside walls. But now, over 100 workers, free men and slaves, lived on a construction site in small, temporary huts. They labored from sunrise till sunset, 6 long days a week, busy with presidential duties. In the house, George worked 7. This is the wood that was sturdy and good, that was nailed near the stone, that was chiseled and honed, thrown over the brick, that was baked strong and thick, that was laid on the foundation, that was dug for our nation, that held a design that stand for all time, that was drawn for the lot, that grand scenic spot, for the president's house that George built. Before George knew it, 8 years had gone by. The president's house was nearly finished, and so was his time in office. During George's last year as president, government officials asked him to change their plans because the house was getting too expensive. George approved the request to use slate instead of lead for the roof, so the president's house was topped with slate rock. Unfortunately, this heavy roof leaked when it rained. This is the roof that was almost waterproof, that went over the wood, that was sturdy and good, that was nailed near the stone, that was chiseled and honed, that went over the brick, that was baked strong and thick, that was laid on the foundation, that was dug for our nation, that held a design that would stand for all time, that was drawn for the lot, a grand scenic spot, for the president's house that George built. George's term as president ended in 1797. He moved back home to Virginia and spent time with his family until his death in 1799. Sadly, George didn't live to see the second president, John Adams, move into the president's house on November 1st, 1800. Although the house wasn't completely finished, the plaster walls were still wet, and the windowless staircase had only a few steps. John and his wife, Abigail, made it their home. This is the day that John came to say, under the roof that was almost waterproof, went over the wood that was sturdy and good, that was nailed near the stone, that was chiseled and honed, that went over the brick, that was baked, strong and thick, that was laid on the foundation, that was dug for our nation, the heart of design, that stand for all time, that was drawn for the lot, that grand scenic spot, real president's house, that George built. Many neighbors stopped by to welcome John and Abigail, eventually come to sneak a peek at the incredible home. This is the house that George built. The end.